Howdy folks, and welcome to another edition of Musket Matters. Today I'm going to present another video in a series of videos that I've been working on to help new shooters that are new to shooting in the North-South Skirmish Association. The N-SSA is a competition shooting organization that was founded in 1950 and focuses on the use of firearms of the time period of the American Civil War. So in today's video, we're going to talk about shooting revolver. We're going to talk about some of the equipment that you're going to need, and then we'll go through the details of how to clear your gun to get on the line, how to load, how to make up ammunition, and how to safety off the line when you're done shooting. So first we'll talk about equipment. I'm going to recommend that you get some kind of tackle box like this. This kind of box is plenty big enough to carry everything that you see here, just one revolver, of course. So I can carry my revolver, my loading stand, my ammunition, all of the tools that I'll need, and my caps and a towel and everything that I need to take to the firing line to shoot the revolver. And that's going to be important because the way these are typically set up at a skirmish is there will be a table, and you will go to the firing line to that table, and you'll unload your equipment onto your portion of the table, and you will load and fire and do what you need to do right there from the table. So a nice shooting box allows you to easily carry all of that gear to the table, and when you're done, take it back again. You don't want to be juggling all kinds of things as you're trying to get down to the firing line and use the table for doing your shooting. So I recommend a tackle box, something like this, some kind of shooting box that's large enough to carry all of your equipment. Of course, you'll need some kind of case for your revolver to protect it. You're going to want probably a capper is allowed. I really like the snail capper style of capper. Unfortunately, it doesn't work well with unmodified Remington revolvers. Works great on the Colts though. So you're allowed to use a capper. You don't have to use a capper. When I'm using my Remington, I typically just put some caps in my hand and cap by hand. So you're going to want some cleaning rods. So I have two of them, one with a brush and one with a cleaning jag, and that way, when I'm shooting, when I'm done with the course of fire, typically I'll just brush. I don't bother with a cleaning patch until I'm done shooting, but you'll want some of these. I'm going to talk about loading stands and how to load here in a minute. We'll get to that. So that's pretty much it for the equipment that you're going to need. Of course, you're going to need percussion caps. So in a previous video, I had talked about ammunition for muzzle-loading arms. And of course, in the N-SSA, you're not allowed to load from a flask. You can't have any loose powder. All of your ammunition has to be made up with pre-made charges of some form. So for revolvers, combustible period-style cartridges are allowed in the North-South Skirmish Association. Eras Gone Bullet Molds has started to produce a whole series of historically accurate bullet molds for 36 and 44 caliber revolvers. So it's now easily possible to make period-correct ammunition, combustible cartridges, and those are allowed in the N-SSA. I'm going to talk about how to use a modern equivalent of a cartridge for what we do, just like I did in the video concerning muzzle loaders. So what a lot of shooters will use, just like with the muzzle loaders, is a rubber or plastic tube like this. These tubes are actually designed to protect threaded fittings for if you're manufacturing or shipping something that's got a threaded rod on it of some kind or some kind of metal protrusion. These plastic caps, rubber caps, were designed to just slip over the threads to protect them in shipping. So they're available in a whole variety of diameters, which work for a whole variety of calibers. So you can get them, for 36 caliber, and you can get them for 44 caliber. So this works just like with the muzzleloading arms. It's a convenient and reusable and low-cost way to have a tube that has a pre-measured charge of gunpowder in it, and then you'll take your bullet and you put it in like a cork, and that's your pre-measured charge ready to go. Now, I also like to pre-measure filler. So what's filler? So when you load a black powder firearm, with a target load, as most competition shooters do. For example, most of the 44s, like a 1860 Army or the Remington New Model Army, most of these guns you'll find develop maximum accuracy with the reproduction guns at around 18 grains of 3F powder. Well, when you put 18 grains in this chamber that was really designed to hold, upwards of 20, maybe 30 grains of powder, you're only going to be filling it to about this far worth of powder. So if you drive the ball down onto the powder, as you should, then that bullet is going to be quite a ways down in the chamber. And the theory is that if you fire it that way, the bullet will have enough distance here to gather quite a bit of velocity before it impinges on the rifling in the barrel. And that might let it strip. Rather than engaging the rifling, it might strip before picking up the rifling, and it might harm accuracy. So the idea is you put your bullet, you put your powder charge down into the chamber, and then you put a measure of inert filler on top of that. Well, what's a filler? Well, some people like to use cream of wheat, which is what I use. Some people use cornmeal, grits. There are different inert fillers, powders that you can put on top of that powder. And then you put the ball, then you seat the ball. And then what happens is the ball will bottom out on that filler, and if you put the right amount of filler in there, the ball will be flush with the chamber mouth. It's important that the ball is not proud of the chamber mouth when you load these things, because if the bullet sticks out of the chamber, it won't rotate in the revolver frame. The bullet nose will jam as you try to revolve the chamber. If you're working at either at half cock or when you're trying to cock it and let it advance to the next chamber, if the bullet stands proud, you got a problem. Easy enough to fix. You just take the cylinder out and take a pocket knife and shave the nose of the bullet off, and then you're back in action again. But you don't want that to happen when you're in the middle of a team competition, that's for sure. So you want to know how much filler it's going to take. Anyway, does the filler do anything for you? Well, you're going to find that most competition shooters in the N-SSA use a filler. Now, I one time did a test. I did a laddered load workup with filler and without filler. Just one time, so not really enough to say much, but I can say that out of that one test, I never had a load without filler that was more accurate than my best load with the filler. So I've always used the filler. All right, so how do you use the filler? Well, I like to make pre-made little cartridges of filler. So I've got cream of wheat. I happen to know that with 18 grains of 3F powder, that 11 grains of cream of wheat will get the ball to where I want it to be on loading. So I've simply taken some of these 36 caliber tubes and used them as pre-measured containers of my cream of wheat. But you don't have to do that. Some people just like to have a bulk container of their filler and make themselves or purchase a little scooper. So I've made this out of a 9mm, modern 9mm casing and some brass wire, and just made a little scoop. And so that allows you to scoop out a measure of filler that you then pour on top of your powder. So some people prefer to do it that way. I just find it easier and faster if I've got everything already made up in pre-measured charges. It makes things go quite fast. All right, so next we're going to talk about what to do when you're on the firing line. So you've gotten to the firing line and you've gotten all your equipment out and arrayed before you and ready to use. So what do we do when we get to the firing line? So first of all, we never cap a revolver unless you are on the firing line. So at some regional skirmishes, you'll have a bench where you can load and fire from the bench. At the nationals, you'll load and fire from a bench. At some regionals though, they don't have enough benches, or they'll have a bench down at the far end of the field perhaps, and you'll have to go load, and then you'll have to go walk to a frame wherever you've posted your target. So you're going to be carrying a revolver to the firing line, uncapped. So it'll be loaded, but not capped. You never cap until you're on the firing line. Okay, so before we're loaded, you are allowed to snap caps if you wish to clear out any oil that might be in the nipples of your revolver. So to do that, you would go to the firing line, you would cap the revolver. Of course, this is all after they have given the, either if it's team competitions, they will give the command, you may now cap your revolvers and snap caps. In individuals, they'll just say, this is a 15-minute course of fire that will start and stop at the sound of the horn. When the horn starts, then you can go to the firing line and fire your 6 caps. I typically don't do that. You're certainly welcome to snap caps on your revolver, but what I'll typically do is simply hold it up to the light, okay? And if you can see daylight through those nipples, then you don't have a problem. And if you don't see daylight through it, you're probably going to want some kind of pick, and then you can just run it through until you can see daylight through those cones. And if you can see daylight through the cones or nipples, then you're not going to have a problem. I've never had a problem with one of these things not going off because it was fouled. So just, if you can see daylight through it, then you're almost certainly good to go. But you can snap caps if you want to spend 60 cents and snap 6 caps on your revolver. All right, so let's suppose you've snapped your caps, or you've decided I'm not going to snap caps. What do we do now? Well, next we have to load our revolvers. Most of the guns that we're going to be using, like a Colt or a Remington, they have a loading lever that's built into them that you can use to load the gun. That's what they did in period, and we can certainly do it here also. If you choose to load on the gun, you're probably going to want to use a loading stand of some kind like this. This is not pretty. I knocked this one up just tonight before making this video so that I'd have something to show for a loading stand. And what this allows you to do is you can rotate this, pour in your charges. I guess I pour it in this side, and then it's got a nice stable platform for ramming those charges home, and it's not walking around, it's not, pointing in an unsafe direction. The stand keeps it pointed up. So this is, if you're going to load on the gun, I'd recommend that you get a loading stand. Not required, right? The N-SSA doesn't require you to use a loading stand. So, but I highly recommend it. It took me 20 minutes to knock this out of some spare lumber that I had, and you can buy them, online if you want to go buy one and don't want to make one. So I recommend it because it's safe. It keeps the gun stable and in a safe direction while you're working on it. But you don't have to. You can load the gun, load the revolver on the gun with the cylinder in the gun. But if you're not going to use a loading stand, you're going to have to be very particular and careful about what you're doing with that muzzle. You don't want to get yourself over the muzzle. You don't want to be pointing at anybody else. And it can be very fiddly, okay? Because what you're going to do is you're going to go to half cock. And first thing we're going to do is take our powder charge. And so you'll take the bullet out, and you'll take your pre-measured charge of powder, and I'm not actually going to load because I'm here in my garage, but you would take this powder and pour it into the chamber, and then if you're using filler, you'd take your filler and pour the filler in on top of it, and then you'd take your bullet and place it, on the chamber, or rather in the chamber, and then rotate it underneath the loading lever and ram it home. And you might want to put the heel of the gun on the table so that you've got something to bear against. But again, important that you maintain positive control over the firearm at all times while you're doing this, okay? And it's not easy, especially in team competition when you got 5 minutes to load, which sounds like a long time, but it really isn't. You're under pressure to get the gun loaded and get ready so that you're not, behind when the horn goes off. So you can do it off the, on the gun. I really recommend, if you're going to do that, like I said, use some kind of loading stand. Okay, so the procedures are going to be the same as what I showed with without the loading stand. what many competition shooters like to use is a cylinder loading stand. And this is also why a lot of shooters prefer the Remington style of revolver or the Rogers and Spencer style of revolver. If you can find them, they haven't been in production for some time. But the reason is because the cylinders are very easily removed from this style of revolver. And this makes it easy to load them and get them back in the gun. You can do this with a Colt. I did it just 2 weekends ago at a skirmish. I shot a Colt, 36 caliber, 1851 Navy. And I use a loading stand still. So after every course of fire, I got to knock the wedge out, break the gun into pieces, extract the cylinder, and then bring it to my cylinder loading stand. So cylinder loading stand, there's a variety of them to choose from. So I'd recommend you get one that drives in a straight line. There are some that are a swing line that swing in an arc. And there's one in particular, I can't remember who makes it, but there's one that's very cheaply made, really thin sheet metal, and you don't want that one. This one, I can't even remember who made this. I think it was called the Tower of Power. I might have got it from Powder Inc., but I don't remember. But there are a variety of these out there to purchase. And they'll come with a variety of mandrels. So this particular one, I've got a mandrel for the Walker, I've got a mandrel for Colt cylinders, and then there's a mandrel here that's sized for the Remington revolver. And then it also comes with 44 and 36 caliber rams to ram the bullet home. So a loading stand like this for your cylinder makes it much easier and quicker to load, especially if you're dealing with a Remington style of revolver. But even with a Colt, it's very nice because now you can take your cylinder and set it on here, and you can take your ammunition, and it gets really quick. So you'll pop the bullet, you'll pour your powder in, and what I'll typically do is I'll do all 6 chambers with powder to start with. And when I pour the powder in, I'll set the bullet there just so that I know that powder has been put in that chamber. And then I'll do all 6 chambers with powder. Then I'll take the bullets off, and then I'll come around with the filler. And I don't put the bullet back on it for that because you can see when you dump the powder in, or rather the filler, when you dump the filler in, you'll see right almost to the mouth of the chamber that there's filler in there. And so you'll go around all 6 chambers with the filler. And then you will come back with your bullets and place them in the chamber. And then you'll drive each one home. Pow, 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 pow. And that makes it very quick and very easy and very consistent way to load the chamber. Now, once you've got your chamber, once you've got your cylinder, all 6 chambers loaded, and yes, we'll load all 6 because we shoot immediately. You're not going to be off the line with a loaded gun, with a loaded cylinder. So we load all 6 because we're going to immediately fire the firearm. All 6 bullets are going down range. Now, talking about 6 shots, because I made this mistake my very first time out shooting. I figured, oh, well, the gun holds 6 rounds. I can put 6 shots on the target. No. Your scoring targets in the N-SSA only have 5 shots on them. If you put more than 5 shots on them, they start subtracting your best hits. So only 5 shots. If you happen to shoot all 5 and you're lucky and you put them all 5 on the paper, then you can just discharge the 6th one into the backstop. But it's great to have that backup shot because especially at 50 yards, sometimes I don't even hit the paper. And I'll be looking through my spotting scope and go, uh-oh, I'm 1 short. Well, with the 6 rounds, that gives you a backup that you can try to hit the paper one more time. So we load all 6 chambers. If you're shooting something like a LeMat in team competition, you're only allowed to have 6 chambers loaded. You can't use all 9, I think the LeMat has. So only 6 shots for the team competition. All right, so after you've loaded your chambers with the bullets, next you have to lube the chambers. So in the N-SSA, all chambers must be lubed, okay? So if you are using pre-lubricated conical bullets. So let's say you're using combustible cartridges, or let's say you're not. Let's say you're using tubes, but you're using a historical bullet that's got grease grooves and your bullets are lubricated. But then you don't have to put any additional lube over the top of the bullet. You can just load your lubricated bullets into the chamber. If you're shooting round ball, it is required by the rules that you have to smear some kind of lubricant over the tops of the balls. I know there's a lot of people that think this is pointless and that there's no reason for it, and that chain fires are caused by ill-fitting balls and the lube doesn't do anything for you, and I agree with all that. I think that the lube is if you have proper fitting bullets, lube isn't really going to do much for you. And in any case, after the first shot, the lube in the adjacent chambers is going to be blown to smithereens. There's not going to be much of it left anyway. However, you will find that by putting lube over the bullets, when you fire the gun and you're done, the fouling still is quite soft, which is another reason why we do it. Now, it does make a bit of a mess. You're going to find the sides of your gun are going to have traces of lube blasted along the side of them. So I always have a shop towel with me when I'm shooting these things, so I can wipe things down, because otherwise they can get pretty greasy. But the rules is the rules. While I'm speaking of rules, I forgot to mention at the beginning of this video that when anything that you see me say here in this video will be superseded by what you find in the rules. So the rules change all the time. They might be different. By the time you watch this video, the rules could have changed, or I might have made a mistake. So if the rules say something that's different from what I say, the rules win, not me. So read the rules. All right, so the rules say that if you're shooting round ball, you have to smear some kind of lubricant over the top of the balls. Doesn't matter what you use. I use basically the same stuff I use for my musket ammunition. It's 50-50 Crisco and beeswax with a little bit of vegetable oil in it to soften it up a bit. So you just, once you're all loaded up with 6 balls, you just take your bullet lube and you just smear it over each chamber until each bullet is covered with some lubricant. After you've done that, you can load it back into the revolver. You don't cap, right? We only cap on the firing line. You never want to cap a loaded, loose chamber, cylinder, because this becomes a hand grenade if you do that, right? If this is loaded with ammunition and powder and you put percussion caps on here and you drop it and it happens to land just the right way to kick off one of those percussion caps, that bullet's going to go somewhere and it's probably not going to feel good if it hits you. So never cap a loaded chamber. All right, so you're going to want then, after keeping your firearm in a safe direction, you will then take your loaded chamber and put it into the firearm. And I like to set the hammer down on one of the half notches in between the chambers. So we're keeping the gun pointed down range, and we now have a loaded but not capped revolver. So after they tell you, if it's individual competitions, you're on your own recognizance. They'll say this is a 15-minute course of fire that will start and stop at the sound of the horn, and then you will, snap your caps and you will load, and then you'll cap and fire. You got 15 minutes to get all that done. If it's team competition, you're going to get explicit commands. There will be a command that says, you have 1 minute to snap caps, or I don't remember the time for revolver, but they'll say you may now snap caps, and you'll cap your revolver and snap them. And then they'll say, okay, you now have 5 minutes to load, and you'll go through the loading motions and get the firearm ready but not capped. Then there'll be another command that says, you now have 1 minute to cap, and you'll cap your revolvers. Again, I can't remember the time. I think it's 1 minute, but anyway, you will cap. And then you'll keep your firearms pointed, downrange. Now you're not allowed to start with the gun at the targets. You got to keep it either resting on the bench or pointing at the ground in front of the bench, but you just stay at the ready until the horn goes off. Once the horn goes off, then you can commence your firing. Then you cock and you commence your firing until you're done. Revolver team events are 90-second events, and when you're done shooting or when you're out of ammo, you'll probably be out before the time is out. You're going to want to sing out to your team captain and say, "I'm empty," because when everybody's empty, there's no reason to keep the clock running. And so the team captain at that point will call time, and then you'll just take the penalty for whatever targets remain unhit out on the frame. So when you're out of ammo, it's important to let your team captain know that you're out of ammo so that he can call time when everyone's out. All right, so you've finished firing the revolver, you've fired your 6 shots. If it's individuals, you put 5 on the target and you've discharged your extra one into the backstop. So the gun is no longer loaded. Now what? Now you need to come off the firing line. So you will call a safety. So there will be people on the firing line from the host team that are walking around with green flags, and they will come, they'll be patrolling, they're going to be watching you, making sure that you're doing things safely. If it's a team competition, you're going to have somebody there dedicated to your team watching to make sure that things are done safely. And then when everyone's done shooting, they will safety you off the line. So for a revolver, if this was downrange, if you're downrange, and behind me is the firing line, but while I'm on the firing line and behind me is behind the firing line, I'm going to call the safety. I'll say safety, and safety will come over to the revolver. You want to keep the revolver pointed downrange and go to half cock, and you will show him each nipple on the chamber, on the cylinder, and show that there's no cap or cap fragments left on any of the cones. If there is a cap fragment, you're going to want to have some kind of knife or a pick or something that you can pick them and get them out of there, because you can't have any caps or cap fragments on those nipples. So you're going to show that. After you've shown that, you're going to raise the firearm so that it's muzzle up, so that the safety can look into these chambers. And what he's looking for is a bullet, okay? And so the safety's going to look, and you're going to rotate through all 6 chambers until the safety says you're cleared. Once you've been cleared, then you can put down the gun, you can resume cleaning it or taking it apart, putting everything away, whatever you're going to do. If it's going to be the next course of fire, if you're in individuals, if you're really fast, you might be able to load and fire, twice in the 15-minute course of fire. I typically don't like to rush myself, so I will fire, I will load, I will fire, and then I'll just clean. I'll brush out the bore, I'll remove the cylinder, brush out the bore, and but not load. You won't load until the next course of fire comes along and you're given the command. This is a 15-minute course of fire. You can start and stop at the sound of the horn. So that, in a nutshell, is how to shoot a revolver in an N-SSA competition. The important things are, of course, safety. Safety, safety, safety. So don't do anything until you've been given the command to do so. In the team competitions, you will be explicitly told when it's okay to snap caps, when it's okay to load and how long you're going to have, when you can cap and get ready, and then the horn will sound when it's time to start shooting, and then you will safety off the line as I demonstrated. You'll safety off the line. It's the same whether you're doing it for individuals on a paper target or team competition. When you're done shooting the revolver, you're going to call a safety, and they're going to look for any spent caps or non-spent caps for sure, but any caps or cap fragments on the nipples, and then they're going to look for any bullets in the chambers. So that's it. That's a basic rundown of the equipment and the ammunition, filler if you choose to use it, and different ways that you might go about loading the gun. Either just use the gun itself to load itself, use a loading stand, or a cylinder loading stand. So that's it. Hopefully this will be useful for you new folks or as a refresher to the old folks. I hope you liked the video. If you do, please click the like button down below, and also subscribe if you'd like to see future videos. I'm going to be continuing to create a whole series of these videos that are geared for new shooters so that they can get some basic understanding of what to expect before they show up for their first skirmish. So, hope you liked it, and we'll see you next time. This video is sponsored by Fourth Armory, your source for templates for making historical paper cartridges.